Chapter 1.
I am a long way from Hertfordshire.
Miss Elizabeth Bennet sat on the edge of her seat, her gloved hands beside her atop the plush cushion, as the carriage took her from Lambton to Pemberley. The gloves had once belonged to her eldest sister, a small reminder of the life she had lived and the sense of dignity she meant to preserve in the days ahead. This was the start of a new life, no longer that of a gently bred young lady, but rather that of a paid companion to a wealthy young woman scarcely older than herself. Her spirits were all a-flutter. The park stretched farther than Elizabeth could see, the carriage winding through its lowest entrance where a stream cut beneath the road. Tall, magnificent oak trees gave way to slender birches, and nearby was a pond where a herd of deer grazed. Elizabeth admired every remarkable view.
Never have I encountered a place where nature has been more generous, or where natural beauty has been so little counteracted by an awkward taste,
she considered. The stately carriage climbed gradually for half a mile before reaching the top of a significant hill where the forest ended. Elizabeth leaned forward, pressing her gloved hands against the carriage window. Pemberley House stood across the valley, commanding attention against the backdrop of wooded hills. Sunlight caught the pale stone, warming its facade. In front of it, a river flowed, substantial, natural in appearance, and without any artificial enhancements. Its banks were neither overly manicured nor artificially adorned. Her eyes traced the simple, elegant lines of the house, noting how it seemed to belong precisely where it sat, neither imposing upon the landscape nor diminished by it. She sat back slowly, nodding once to herself.
To be mistress of such a place must surely be something.
She could not help but utter aloud, as the reality of her situation would not be repressed. Elizabeth reminded herself she was embarking on a life of service, although one that bore a genteel distinction. To be a paid companion, rather than a governess or lady's maid, offered its own kind of dignity. She would answer directly to the mistress, not the housekeeper, and that alone gave the position a certain elevation. What that distinction meant in practice, however, would soon become painfully clear. In the ensuing months, Elizabeth came to understand how little she had grasped about her new situation. Had she known the true state of Mrs. Darcy's health, she might have hesitated before accepting the position. The bad days were far exceeding the good days of late, and the manor house was uncommonly still, as if Pemberley itself maintained a vigil over its mistress. For 3 weeks Mrs. Darcy had remained in bed, suffering an ailment that defied all the physician's remedies. She should never have lingered outside the partially opened door of Mr. Darcy's study one particular day. Her mounting concern over his well-being held her firmly in place. It would not do to be caught lingering in such a state. What would the servants, and most importantly the housekeeper, think? Elizabeth nearly continued on her way, but a faint sound stopped her. Against her better judgment, she eased closer to the door. Holding her breath to still her racing heartbeat, she slowly pushed it open and peeked inside, for she was far too curious a creature to do otherwise. Fitzwilliam Darcy sat in a chair by the window. He held what appeared to be a miniature in his hand. His thumb swept longingly across its surface.
"Rosalie,"
he whispered. The single word carried such a mix of tenderness and despair that Elizabeth felt the impropriety of her bearing witness to it most acutely. She had never seen the master thus, his proud shoulders bent, his composure undone. He usually presented himself with perfect dignity, authoritative, assured, and always in command, his features schooled, to betray nothing of the anxiety he surely felt for his wife. But here, believing he was unobserved, the careful mask had fallen away. As Elizabeth watched, she could not but discern this was not merely the concern of a gentleman for his ailing spouse. What she was witnessing, she likened to a devotion she had not credited him with possessing. In that moment, Elizabeth understood that beneath Mr. Darcy's reserved demeanour and formal address lay a heart capable of profound attachment. And she realised too that for all the grandeur of Pemberley, for all the servants who attended his every need, Mr. Darcy was utterly alone in his suffering. The knowledge settled uncomfortably in her chest. She stepped back, her movements measured now, and continued on, the image of his solitary figure etched into her memory. That night Elizabeth turned from side to side in her bed. Mr. Darcy's face appeared whenever she closed her eyes, not just his anguish, which had moved her, but the raw intimacy of it, which she had no right to witness. She pulled the pillow over her head, as if to smother the persistent thought that she had glimpsed something in him that stirred her in ways a proper companion to his wife should never feel.
What manner of love must he harbour for his wife that would render so composed a gentleman so vulnerable?
She had been in service at Pemberley for months, yet she realised how little she knew of the master and mistress beyond the boundaries of her position. The following morning Elizabeth attended to her duties most diligently, yet her busy mind remained unsettled. She had decided to bring fresh flowers to Mrs. Darcy's apartment, a task she now approached with increasing trepidation, having to bear witness to the mistress's steady decline.
Enter.
The physician calmly called out in response to her soft knock. The room was dim, the heavy curtains drawn against the bright light that might disturb the mistress's rest. Dr. Hartley stood by the bedside, his expression grave as he conversed in hushed tones with Mr. Darcy. Elizabeth replaced the wilting blooms with fresh flowers from Mrs. Darcy's private garden, long the province of Pemberley's mistress, from Darcy's grandmother to Rosalie, and now tended by Elizabeth as a courtesy to Rosalie amid her continuing decline.
I fear there has been little improvement, sir,
the doctor was saying.
The fever persists despite our best efforts.
Mr. Darcy's response was too low for Elizabeth to discern, but the stiff set of his shoulders spoke of his distress. As she arranged the flowers, she could not help but observe the still figure beneath the cover. Mrs. Darcy's hair lay limp against the pillows, her fair skin now alarmingly pale. How different she must appear from the vivacious lady who had arrived at Pemberley as a bride just 3 years prior, Elizabeth could only surmise. She had nearly completed her task when Mrs. Darcy stirred, her eyes fluttering open momentarily.
"Fitzwilliam?"
she murmured. Mr. Darcy was at her side in an instant, taking her hand between his own.
I am here, my dear,
he assured her, his voice tender.
Always here.
A faint smile graced Mrs. Darcy's lips before she drifted once more to sleep. Elizabeth watched Mr. Darcy's fingers trace the outline of his wife's palm with such tenderness that she felt both moved and ill at ease. She was touched by the depth of his feeling, yet sensible of the possibility that no one would ever look at her with such admiration. When she at last slipped from the room, she pressed a hand to her breast, disturbed by the bevy of sensations therein. Later that same day, the housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds, pleasant yet commanding by nature, approached Elizabeth below stairs with a harried expression.
"Miss Bennet, I hate to impose in this manner. Pray take this broth up to the master's study. He has not eaten since yesterday, and he will not leave Mrs. Darcy's side save when the doctor insists upon it."
"Surely, Mr. Waters,"
Elizabeth began, referring to Mr. Darcy's valet.
"Is occupied with other matters,"
Mrs. Reynolds replied.
"The master will take nourishment more readily from someone who will not lecture him on his duty to maintain his strength. And you have such a gentle manner about you."
Elizabeth could hardly refuse a direct request from the housekeeper, even though this particular assignment fell far below her responsibilities as a paid companion and one who answered to the mistress. In light of the turmoil in the household, this was hardly the time for Elizabeth to opine. Everyone in the household was doing the best they could. With apprehension, she carried the silver tray up the stairs. The hallway stretched before her, empty and silent save for the soft tick of the clock. She paused at the study door, balancing the tray carefully as she knocked. When no answer came, she knocked again, a little louder. Still nothing. concern overrode her hesitation, and Elizabeth turned the handle and eased the door open. Mr. Darcy stood by the window, his back to her, looking out over the grounds. He had not heard her come inside the room, so lost was he in contemplation. A pressed flower and several letters bundled with string were arranged upon his large mahogany desk.
Sir.
He turned, startled from his reverie.
Miss Bennet, I did not hear you.
Mrs. Reynolds sent this, sir. She thought you might take some nourishment.
A mixture of gratitude and simple weariness shone in his dark eyes.
You may leave it there,
he said, gesturing to a table. As Elizabeth set down the tray, her eyes fell upon an arresting sketch. The drawing depicted a young woman seated on a stone beside a secluded pond, with her skirts gathered neatly at her ankles and an open book resting in her lap. Though the lines wavered and the proportions were not quite true to life, the artist had captured something striking in her countenance, especially her eyes, drawn with such attention to detail.
My wife drew that,
said Mr. Darcy, noticing where Elizabeth's eyes had settled.
When she came to Pemberley, she claimed to have little talent for it, but
His voice waned.
I have always treasured it.
I sense a certain warmth to it, sir,
Elizabeth said. Mr. Darcy's expression softened.
Yes, Rosalie has always possessed that ability. She infuses warmth in everything she touches.
Then, seeming to remember himself, he straightened his shoulders.
Thank you for bringing the tray.
It was a dismissal, yet Elizabeth was reluctant to leave him to his solitude.
Is there anything else you require, sir?
He shook his head, then paused.
Actually, Miss Bennet, if you would be so kind as to inquire whether there has been any change in Mrs. Darcy's condition.
Of course, sir.
You have been listening to Hearts Unspoken. I hope you enjoyed this dramatization, an engaging glimpse inside the story. For more storytelling adventures like this, let us know in the comments. Thank you for listening, and remember to like, subscribe, and share these stories. Your support helps this channel grow and keeps the stories coming.